video is for Chapter 1, and the content will be about physical properties and chemical properties. Remember to use your packet that we've given you in class to take notes. At any time, if we've gone too fast or you need material repeated, feel free to pause or rewind the video. And anything that doesn't make sense, make sure you write down a question that you can ask in class tomorrow so that we can talk about this as a group. Okay, so starting off in the physical properties section, we are looking at a physical property. Now, first of all, the word property is just another word for a characteristic or a trait. But a physical property in our class is going to refer to any property that could be measured on any substance without changing the identity of the substance. Now, some are listed below. So, for example, I can look at an object, and without changing what it is, I can tell you what color it is. I could tell you roughly how big it is. I can use measurements to give exact size. Luster means shine. So luster is if something has a shine or not. I can tell you whether or not it has a smell, and I can measure a boiling point or a melting point by putting a thermometer in the object, whether it's a liquid or a solid, and I can measure that boiling point or melting point without changing the identity of the substance that I'm looking at. So that's what a physical property is. Now, there are two types of physical properties. The first type of physical property is called an intensive physical property. And an intensive physical property does not depend on the size of the sample. So, for example, if you have copper, whether you have a small copper penny or a large sheet of copper, no matter how much of it you have, it will always have that same distinctive reddish brown color. Same for water as another example. No matter how much water you have, it will always freeze at 0 degrees Celsius. So whether you have a small beaker or test tube filled with water or an entire lake filled with water, it will freeze at 0 degrees Celsius. The most common intensive properties are density, which if you remember from 9th grade physical science is mass divided by volume. Freezing points, which is the same as a melting point. Boiling point would go in there. Color, luster again means shine. Malleability, which means how you can bend and mold a piece of metal. Temperature and conductivity, how well it conducts heat or electricity. So those are some examples of intensive physical properties. Now the next kind of a property is an extensive physical property. And extensive properties do depend on how much you have. So if I have more of something, that kind of property would change. For example, if I have a piece of copper wire and I cut it in half, now the length will be different. So length is an example of extensive because it does depend on how much I have. Volume, mass, weight are all examples of extensive physical properties. So physical properties are things that can be measured without changing the identity of the substance. And the next one, chemical properties, when you measure them or observe them, the identity of the substance will change. So it's a chemical property is defined as the ability of a substance to undergo a change that will change its identity. So in a chemical property, it's only going to be observable during a chemical reaction. Now, there's a lot of examples, but I've listed something could be flammable. So if I tell you that something is flammable, you'll only observe that that property if you try lighting it on fire. Now, equally, something could be flame resistant, and that is also a chemical property. Resisting corrosion means that it won't rust very easily, but if something is corrosive, it means that it will break down very easily. Tarnishing is like when silver changes color. So there are lots of these examples, but chemical properties, when you start and finish, what you have is different. In a physical property, what you start and end with is the same. So chemical properties and physical properties, hopefully you've been summed up. Now I want you to try the learning check that it goes right after this video to see if you're understanding the difference between a physical property, both intensive and extensive, and a chemical property.